Hello, this is Hunter McDermott with another episode of Guitar Blog. This is episode 19. It is Monday, December 2nd, 2019, 4:45 p.m. I hope everyone watching, if you are in the States, that you had a nice Thanksgiving. I sure did. Let's see, the big thing going on now in my life is my musical life anyway. I got a new amp. So I had long been eyeing getting a new amp, specifically a brand called Henriksen, who are kind of known for making amps kind of geared toward jazz players. Though they are certainly not limited to that. They're good amps in general, and you can run all kinds of instruments through them. So the other amp that I typically use is a Blues Junior, and I like it a lot. It's got some nice tones, and certainly it's widely used even by some jazz players. And there's, I guess, not much of a substitute for the kind of tube sound. But it's not really an amp I chose. It kind of came to me, came to acquire it, and didn't really have much of an opinion about amps at the time. So was happy to have it and have used it for years at this point. But this kind of feels like the first time, similar to the Telecaster. Like bought guitars for years and some amps for years and stuff, but I really always made my decisions in a bad way, which was this person said this was good, or that person uses this, or I just think that looks neat. Like that's how I bought guitars for the longest time. I was like, this one has a racing stripe, so I bought that. Or this one, has a cool Bigsby on it, or whatever. And so I probably ended up with some good gear, but was not gear that I liked. Like even I had this Gibson 335, and I paid a ridiculous amount of money for it at the time. But I didn't even really like it that much. Like I remember even being in the shop trying to tune it and going like, this doesn't feel right. But I was so convinced that was what I wanted that I pulled the trigger anyway. And then I ended up selling it a couple years later. So anyway, the Telecaster to me is like the first one that I played a lot. I wanted it initially for that same reason. Like, well, Julian Lage plays it, and Dave Bazan played one, and Ed Bickert and Tim Lurch and all these people. So it had a good pedigree, and I liked the black pickguard on the yellow kind of style. But I took the time to actually play a bunch of them and make sure that it could really produce the sounds that I was trying to get. So anyway, that's where I am now with this amp. I picked up, it's called the Bud 10. So the company Henriksen, they're out of Arvada, Colorado, are famous for a little 6.5-inch speaker amp. I think it's called the Bud, which I think was named after the guy who runs Henriksen now. His dad was named Bud, I think. Anyway, they're good little amps, and they finally came out with one that's in a 10-inch speaker, so it's a little bit closer to the size of an amp that I want. I'm confident I can bring this to a jam and play with a drummer and other instruments and not get drowned out, So what I really like about it is it's got 2 channels. So what you're hearing right now is this condenser mic here, going into the amp with phantom power, and then my guitar going into the amp. The guitar is actually running through a pedal board, so I'm getting my reverb from my Strymon Flint, but it's got a pretty decent built-in reverb as well. And actually the built-in reverb is happening on the vocals a little bit on the mic. And then all that is going into a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2, so I'm just kind of blending those into one signal and then sending it into the computer. I tend to record these using iMovie because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have a nice camera or audio setup, so having everything coming in one audio input is useful for me because I know I could probably set up all kinds of weird software things to merge stuff and get it, but I just don't want to worry about it. So anyway, this is nice because I can plug everything in. I've got 2 discrete channels, and I can use one or the other or both, and then it's got a line out that I can just send into whatever I want. So potentially ever if I want to play a gig with it, I can sing and play guitar with it, or run the guitar into the amp and have the amp kind of face me as a monitor and then run the line out to the PA or whatever. So it's got a ton of flexibility. It's got a headphone jack. It's got an 1/8 inch input for auxiliary. I could run the iPad in there or the computer or whatever. And it's also got Bluetooth, so if I don't have a cable or don't want to use that, I can run it through Bluetooth. The second channel has a bright switch, which I probably won't ever use, but might come in handy if I want to, modulate the vocals somehow, modify it somehow. So anyway, I just got it like a few hours ago, and what I did so far is I just turned every dial on the guitar channel to about 3 o'clock, and I'm playing with that. So I have no real insights into how to get the best tone for me right now. Just kind of messing around with it. But the good thing is, I think it sounds pretty good right there. So anyway, that's what's going on here with the music stuff, with music gear stuff. For what I'm actually doing, what I'm actually playing, so I did some thinking the other day. So, as I have said on this blog many times, I really struggle with staying focused. I've tried all these different things, different courses and different methods for practicing and staying on task and all this kind of stuff and trying to head someplace. And I always get distracted. Like this past week, I picked up a book by Tony Greaves. He's online. He sells his stuff online, does videos, called Triad Pairs, A First Step. And it's a great book. Like, it shows off this cool kind of thing. Taking these CD triads, which are a whole step apart, major triads a whole step apart, and playing them over different chord types to pull out these different chord tones. So like if you play that over a G major chord, you get kind of like a Lydian thing, I think. Anyway, it's a cool idea, and it's a whole new approach to soloing. But it really is just not what I need to be focusing on right now. It's a whole completely 360, rather 180 turn into a different direction. And I got into it a little bit and played around with it some, and I think there's tons of value to it, and I may come back to it someday, but right now it's just piling on another thing that it's going to be distracting to me. So I don't want to do that. And then I started thinking about Randy Vincent's book about melodic cells. So I was doing all this stuff like right, you remember that stuff with the cycling dominants? Well, you can do that same kind of thing with like a minor chord. Instead of doing dominant to dominant, you can do minor to dominant. And now you got a 2-5, like a minor 2 dominant 5 thing. And so that seemed more useful to me. And I thought, well, let me take some time and dive back into that stuff, kind of build on some of the work that I've already done with that, and see where that takes me. And I played with that for a little while. And then I thought, well, this still doesn't feel like music, and I don't really want to run through this. And I got really discouraged, and I started thinking, what do I even want to do, right? What am I even trying to do? So I feel like I've thought about this in the past, but I hadn't really ever come up with a clear answer from like a playing standpoint. So when I think about who inspires me to play at all, Julian Lage comes to mind. John Scofield, a huge influence. That record, A Go-Go, and then he did one called Quiet. Those two in particular, I love the stuff he's done with Medeski, Martin, and Wood. Combo 66 is one of his newer ones. That's really, really good. And then, of course, some of the older guys, Miles Davis, I love because of just, I can't really reproduce what he sounds like on the guitar because he's playing the trumpet, so he's got different methods for holding notes out and giving them more character than I can do on the guitar. But I love Miles's playing, especially the earlier playing when he got into a little bit wackier stuff, kind of like Coltrane. As it got a little crazier, I don't find that quite as exciting and interesting personally. Anyway, so really thinking hard, not just about who inspires me to play, which is important, but thinking about if I sit down and I play, what do I want to sound like? What is the way that I want to be able to play and make sound, so that when I listen back to my own solo or finish playing, I feel like I did something good that sounded good in my head. So really, what that is bebop, and I love especially like that early Miles stuff, like on Bag's Groove, that record, Sonny Rollins, basically anything by Sonny Rollins. There are probably tons of other people. I mean, Charlie Parker, of course, and Monk and stuff like that. So I just love this sound, being able to take an eighth note thing and take like an arpeggio and add chromaticism to it. So you're really hitting the changes. You're playing melodically, but you're also making it sound hip by slipping in all these little chromatic things. And certainly that on the guitar, I think, is especially appropriate, because holding out long notes is a little less exciting and interesting for a guitar player than it is for a trumpet or a saxophone or whatever instrument you have to breathe into to play. So then I started thinking, well, okay, there's this course that I purchased a while ago that's specifically about bebop guitar. It's by a guy called Richie Zellen, and I can't remember what the name of the course is, but I think it's the only one that he offers. It's like bebop guitar or something. I've also looked at some stuff from Cheryl Bailey, which is also good. But the Richie Zellen stuff, it starts out by giving you all these chord or these scale fingerings, and I immediately hit a brick wall with that, because I tried some of them out and I just felt like there's probably some value here, but I've spent the last 10 years at least, maybe more, with the major scale patterns that I learned, which is only 5 patterns, and I like that, and my whole brain is sort of focused around that. So it's not that I couldn't or shouldn't learn some new way to approach it, but it felt to me like a very big deviation. Like I couldn't get into the meat of learning the bebop stuff because I was stuck on the scale fingerings. So I pulled that stuff up yesterday and I started looking at it again, and what I'm going to try to do is just ignore, and Richie, if you're watching, I'm sorry, but I'm going to try to ignore all the fingering stuff, all the scale fingerings, and just look at the content around like melodic, or what is it called? Intervallic script. So he's kind of just codifying how to express a phrase without writing actual notes, without deciding on a key, just kind of all with intervals. So based on this chord as the root, here's the intervals that you would play, and put those together. And I kind of like that it doesn't really involve a specific rhythm either, because that way it allows you to create your own stuff. Just take it and then modify the rhythm. So anyway, I played around with that for a little bit yesterday, and I already like what's coming out. I pretty much just did like one of the exercises, but it was a whole new way of building onto arpeggios that I know. So let's see, like on a C7 chord, so on that arpeggio, starting wherever you want, but starting high and going low at least. So doing this kind of neighbor tone thing, so going from the flat 7 to the 6, and then bridging the gap down, so then the 5, and then the 3, going 3, 2, 3, and that's an octave, so, and then continuing down. See if I can do it. Whatever. And then taking the 2, 3 and flatting the 3, so then you get more of a chromatic thing. Let's see. Right, doing the, is that right? Let's see. No, that's the 3. That's the flat 3. So 3 to flat 3. So then already that's giving you that slightly more bebop-y sound, throwing in that flat 3. And then just something as simple as doing the neighbor tone thing. Like that's a cool lick right there, and it's just an exercise. Whatever. It's kind of, I can already see a little bit the path that you take, building this chromatic stuff into an arpeggio that I already know. So I already am somewhat comfortable, if I'm playing a blues. Kind of outlining the changes very loosely with arpeggios. So if I can take all that knowledge that I have of arpeggios and the scale tones themselves and build in this chromatic stuff around that, then that to me makes sense, right? In my brain, I've already got this thing that's an arpeggio. I know I can already take it to a jam and play it and it'll sound fine. And then I'm taking this bebop language, this chromatic stuff, and I'm just kind of adding it in, mixing it in with the stuff that I already know. So that is, the way that I think a lot of people want their education to go. You want to feel like you're building on something that you already know, rather than throwing out everything you know and trying to learn something brand new, right? That's why we always use analogies to explain things, because it's easier to explain something using terms that somebody might understand, right? So that's kind of how this feels to me. It's like, oh, I get arpeggios. Oh, I see what you're doing. You're modifying the arpeggio, rather than going, what's this, scale fingering, and how does this have to do with anything, So I don't know. That's where I am right now, and I'm really liking that stuff. And, importantly, I feel like it's leading me toward the way I want to sound, the way I want to play. I want to be able to play fast licks and fill the space with notes, because I think the guitar is sort of designed like that, kind of like the piano. Like, you don't sustain stuff typically. You go for faster runs, fill it up with more notes, because you don't have the same capabilities that a wind instrument might have. At least that's the way I see it. All right, so that's where I am with what kind of like content I'm practicing, as far as like exercises and stuff. I started learning Oleo. Let's see. Anyway, I started learning Oleo, and I've never really spent time or effort learning a rhythm changes tune, so that's kind of what I'm doing. And then Brent from Learn Jazz Standards had a really great podcast a couple weeks ago called the Stair-Step Practice Plan, I think. And it's what he uses in one of his courses, not the one that I'm in, but another one. And it made a lot of sense. It was a good way to kind of cover a lot of material in a fashion that, again, builds from day to day or practice session to practice session, week to week, all around learning a tune. So you learn the head to a tune, then you learn the chords to the tune, then you learn a technical exercise. So that's where like the Richie Zellman stuff works in. A technical exercise would be taking these arpeggios and running them through these, what Richie calls the bebop calisthenics. So just like these little exercises that build up your chops and your technique around chromatic stuff. And then learning solos. So this is Miles' solo. Anyway, I need to review that, but that's the first bit of Miles' solo from Oleo from Bag's Groove. which is a cool recording. It's something I've listened to before but never really realized. Like, there's a piano player on that record. I don't know who it is off the top of my head, but on that particular tune, the piano player doesn't really comp, which is crazy. So he or she, probably he, is there playing, and they play a little bit in the intro, and then they sit out. So when Miles takes a solo, and then I think Coltrane is on that recording. It's not actually Sonny on that recording, I don't think, but anyway, could be wrong. When Miles takes the solo, it's bass and drums, and they're just holding down the groove, and then Miles is soloing. And I thought that was just so crazy that you've got this piano player in the room sitting there, and they're not comping. But it's also encouraging, because what happens with me when I'm playing at my jam and there's no other chording instrument is that when I take a solo, it's me, bass, and drums. So hearing more of that and feeling like, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I want to still work on putting chords into my solos, just because I think that would be good. But certainly if I don't, it was okay if Miles did it. It's okay if I do it, right? It's kind of just validating of that approach. All right, I feel like there was one more thing. And then the last thing is the Jazz Blues Accelerator course. So I'm still working on that. And in fact, I planned maybe today to work on writing my next etude or my next blues head or whatever you want to call it, to finish out the second of the 3 modules. I kind of wanted to do it on the blog, but now I've talked too much. So maybe I'll play whatever I come up with next time. It was more like just talking this week, so sorry about that. But so anyway, that's still a lot of stuff. But again, it's like, here's a practice plan, and it's got all these little gaps, these little blanks in there. I can put whatever song into that I want. And then it's got me transcribing stuff, and it's got me working out things in different keys. And then Richie Zellin stuff has got the exercises that fit into that. So even though I'm still talking about a bunch of different things, they're all jiving together at the same time. So I'm not piling on necessarily tons of new stuff that's taking me in different directions. I'm really just packaging little bits and pieces from different things into what I am focusing on. And that feels good, but it always feels good when you first start, right? So December is, I guess, my test. I want to see if I can stay focused on this stuff that I'm working on for this month, and then if that works, keep on going with it. But anyway, that's a lot of name dropping of different content out there, material. I can recommend all of it. There's so much good stuff. The key is finding out what you actually care about, what you want to work on, who you want to sound like, what you want to sound like, whatever, and then doing that. So like working on triad pairs, for example, is not strictly bebop. It certainly has a lot of chromatic stuff in it, but it's a different way of thinking about it than modifying arpeggios, really, which I think is kind of bebop in a nutshell. You're playing the changes, but you're slipping all these chromatic stuff into it. And that, again, that feels like it's building on what I already know and what I can already do, and that seems like the best thing that I could be doing right now. So, that's it for me. I meant to play more on this episode, but I didn't get around to it, and I am sorry. So I will try to show off more of the stuff that I'm playing and working on. I'm actually kind of just getting back into the swing of things after the holiday week. So I'll have more to play later. But anyway, thank you for watching. Check all that stuff out. And think, if you're in the position that I am in, whatever, where maybe you have been banging your head against the wall for a while and not feeling like you're getting better, or not feeling like you're working toward a clear goal, take some time and think about not only who inspires you to play, but who you would want to sound like. Now, there's always going to be the aspect of, well, I don't want to just be a carbon copy of somebody. Certainly I want to add my own self to whatever I play. But as far as studying is concerned, trying to sound like somebody can be good, right? It's good to build up those skills and not worry so much about the creative aspect of it. That will come, right? But anyway, thinking about those as two separate camps. Here's who I really am inspired by and listen to, and here's really what I kind of want to sound like. And then make sure that whatever you're working on is headed more toward what you want to sound like, and then use the other camp of inspiration to continue to inspire you, to motivate you, listen to that stuff, and continue to be excited about playing and learning. So that's my advice for this week. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.